and this broadcasting on my YouTube. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cameron Reads Comics. I'm Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them. But more importantly, today I have one of the best writers currently working in comics, Mark Russell, the one and only. Mark, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Cameron.
Welcome back. Okay, I asked you a long time ago to come on the platform for. It was after I'd read Snagglepuss Chronicles, which was a book that knocked my socks off. In my opinion, it had no right being as good as it was. And then it just like led me down the trajectory of everything you were writing at the time. So now I've read so much more of your work, and I'm so glad. But that book has now been dethroned as my favorite, and my favorite is One Star Squadron. I think it is like Exit Stage Left was obviously magnificent. I think it's like Watchmen level good, but One Star Squadron, which I actually have right next to me. There you go, my personal trade right here. It was the book that I journaled about the most, and it keeps coming back to me. That final monologue, it's just one of my absolute favorites. So we can just hop right in. Actually, first, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm just enjoying the summer. I'm having a nice little Portland summer here. And thanks so much for what you said, not only about Snagglepuss, but about One Star Squadron, because I feel like that was one of my titles that sort of flew under the radar. I feel like I poured as much as myself into that as into anything. And I feel like it is one of the best things I've written and just sort of went over like a damp squib.
You know what? I really do believe, because also I'm just a sucker for Steve Lieber art, and like it was the dual force of both of you. And that's not to knock any of your other partners. Obviously, we're going to talk about Mike and Laura Allred and your collaborations with Steve Pugh and your principle that you said last time, stick with the Steves. Like, I'm a huge fan. So I that one in particular, I just think your lane, and not to say that you're a single lane kind of writer, but it's the perfect balance of satire and how you went into that story. I just was the balance too you had. The stakes were so there, and right last time I talked to you, I think it was right after the first issue had come out. But now it's like, now that it's all done, I was like, oh, it's just knocked my socks off. I think that's the perfect title. And not that everything needs to get adapted, but I'm like, if James Gunn like comes across that story, and I'm so glad Patton Oswalt is like writing forwards and introductions and pundits for you. I'm just like, that's exactly why I trust you the most with these lower tier characters, because you can take so many liberties with them.
I think what's also kind of fun about writing them is that you can do things with the second bananas, the third bananas that you can't do with the crown jewels. You know, it's like you can take chances with these stories. You can actually tell stories about the lives of superheroes themselves, or about things beyond the traditional superhero universe. Uh, and tell stories that are more relatable and human, because you're dealing with people who are not at their prime. And most of us are either on our way up, we're still mostly potential, or we're on our way down and we're, in decline, and we're trying to hold on to what we had. And I felt like that was what I wanted to write about with One Star Squadron, is about most of our existence as people, which is either on the way up or on the way down, and very little time do we actually spend at the top of our game. But almost every superhero comic is about that brief period of time where you're at the nexus of your abilities.
Yeah, and I think I love that, and I hope that's not, I hope that's not how you feel about yourself, because in my opinion, you're only on the way up. I think you're. I
Well,
think I'm
thanks.
sure.
I would be happy with a slow decline, I think, but I tried to. I think the way you sort of keep yourself from like going into like a tailspin as a writer or as any sort of artist is to keep pushing yourself and trying things you haven't done before,
Yeah.
or trying to paint yourself into a corner and then forcing yourself to get out. It's the only way I don't really grow as a writer. So hopefully, at least if I am in decline, I will fool people and they won't know I am, because I'm doing new things.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think you've given yourself so many lanes, which is like kind of what we're going to talk about. I have questions about that. One Star Squadron, I think the original pitch, the in the door pitch, felt like it was office based, and I think I heard you talk about that. And I see the office space in it all, the fun, like the obviously the movie Office Space. But what made you want to lean into such a serious tone? Because what I like about your story is that you write stakes so much better than every other writer. So what was it the realization of maybe your best work being behind you, not you, but the characters, or was it something else?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things, and also, but mostly about, how, jobs, even fairly benign jobs, are sort of dehumanizing because
Mhm.
they are thinking about you in terms of a role, not in terms of a person, and about how the modern workplace, the 21st century workplace in particular, which is about, which is based on freelancing and aspirations. And if you can't make enough money to live as an Uber driver, that's on you, buddy. That's your fault. You're just not trying hard enough. And that's
Yeah.
sort of the most tragic thing out there because, it's like almost nobody can do it. And yet instead of like having a sense of solidarity, like it's us against the man, it forces us to sort of be our own jail keeper. It's like, no, it's me against me because I'm not trying hard enough or I'm not doing the right things. And I feel like this is sort of what I wanted to write about in the context of superheroes, where they're not able to really make a living or even really get respect as superheroes, and the avenues by which they can make money or earn respect are rapidly dwindling, and yet they blame themselves. And I think
Yeah.
that this is what I find so heroic about Red Tornado, is that he's trying to get as many people back into the lifeboat as possible. It's like he knows that they're in decline. He knows that their abilities are not going to be rewarded in the marketplace, but he's trying to shelter them from that reality as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, and there's so many tropes in there that are in the traditional office workplace as well.
Right.
I
It's
think
not really just about superheroes. It's really about us all. But it really is kind of ultimately about, this is the new heroism. The new heroism is saving ourselves from an economy that doesn't really take care of us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a quote in I just finished Not All Robots and I've just chewed on that for the last week, but there's the quote in Not All Robots where they talk about that. And we're going to stay on 1 star right now, but we will get into Not All Robots. But it's oh my gosh, I'm going to misquote it right now, but it's talking about when did the quality of life have to do with output, or the quality of a worker have to do with output and not the value. Or I guess it was talking about the value of a worker came out of their output, and as opposed to what they have to offer, which I thought was so interesting. And I see so many beats similarly in 1 Star Squadron that I do in Not All Robots. Which actually brings me to my next question. One of uh, you talk a lot about the idea that the problem is masquerading as the solution. Um, is this a personal idea to you?
Yeah, I feel like this is a lot of what, especially in the 21st century and the sort of aspirational sort of like you can do anything, society is that we're presenting the problem to people as the solution, or
Yeah.
we're presenting like them a shovel. We're giving them a shovel with which to dig themselves out of a hole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have one more question about 1 Star Squadron, and it is about my favorite line. Other than I just want everyone who's listening or watching this to read 1 Star Squadron, because I think it's a top 10 book for me. I want you to know that, because like I hear Tom King is talking about Supergirl didn't sell well, but now it's his best selling book, and Josh Williamson talks about Rogues not selling well, and I'm like, those are 10 out of 10 books. And now you talking about 1 Star Squadron not being like the number one ever, I think is just a shame on all comic readers. So let me know. Let me let you know. It hit with me so well. And it's specifically the last line. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the character's name. Is it the Patriot
Oh,
or
Minuteman.
Minuteman? Okay, yes, because he couldn't be She couldn't. Last time I talked to you, you said he couldn't be Hourman because his powers only last 1 minute. And so, but Minuteman, his monologue in the letter to Red Tornado, uh, every good hero story is the story of helping other people survive. Uh, what is your process? Because that whole monologue, I made my girlfriend listen to it last night. I was like, just listen to this. And what's your process in writing something like that? How long does that take? What is that like for you?
Well, it takes time, it rarely comes out of my fingertips perfect. It usually is like I have an idea of what I want to say. I'll try a different few ways of writing, and I'll usually spend too much words saying what it is I want to say. And then as I go through and rewrite, especially when I get to the process where I'm, actually got the artwork and I'm trying to cut down on the lettering, that's usually when the magic happens. That's usually when it's like, okay, here's the line. Here's what I'm trying to say in as few as words as possible. And those are usually the most impactful moments in the comic, right? I successfully say what it is I've been trying to say for the entire issue, but I can say it within like 8 words.
Yeah. And I also, as a fan, applaud you for that because I think that's where sometimes, it is a visual medium as well. And some writers don't take those liberties, to trim it down so that the art can shine. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, again, really the only way to write comics, I think, is to get as many words off the page as you possibly can, because right, especially when you're working with an artist like Steve Lieber, because the art is so gorgeous, and that's really what should be carrying the story whenever possible. And the words and the words themselves have much more impact when they're the exception to the rule.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when it comes to Lightning, like one of the perfect artists for that story, like tonally. Sometimes I feel like the art is a mismatch with the tone. Steve Lieber for One Star Squadron, I think, is tonally absolutely perfect, especially coming off the heels of his Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen run that I just loved. I
feel bad. I feel like I owe Steve an apology for squandering all of his cachet after Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen on One Star Squadron, and he was getting offers to do like Justice League stuff, but he really wanted to do One Star Squadron with me, and so I lured him down a career cul-de-sac. So I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, he's listening, and I'm sure he's just fine because I think this is just going to age like fine wine. It only becomes more true.
I don't worry about it when something doesn't sell that well on floppies, because I feel like everything I've done has sold like garbage, when it was in floppy format, but then it finds its audience when it's a book. So I feel like that's the way I write. And I feel like nothing ever is a failure, because if nothing else, I can hand sell it at conventions and people will discover it years later. A good example of that is Prez. Like Prez was like by any standard measure, a complete failure. It was canceled after 6 issues, didn't sell for shit. And for me, I'd kind of written it off as like, okay, well, this is my boot camp. This is where I learned how to write comic books. But now it's getting, it got a re-release as one of those compact comics. And,
just now, yeah.
And we're doing a deluxe edition, so it's surprising to me that it's having this second life, and people are reacting to it. But in a lot of ways, it feels actually more relevant now than it did in 2015. And so it's just, they're, as long as they exist in the ether, they're still alive. As long as they're in print, they're still, it's not, if you're writing something and it's got to sell in the next 6 months, or it's just going to never be thought of again, then you're probably not writing something very good. And so if you write something you have confidence in, you feel strongly about it, it's okay to, like, if it doesn't come out of the gate, blazing, it's okay to like let it just survive until it finds an audience.
Yeah. And I think I think that everyone who finds your work is going to fall into it backwards, because like Batman Dark Age is one of the best examples where, you're writing a Batman book, which is going to get eyes on it. But I have friends currently that are just like, oh, wow, this Batman Dark Age is such a great story. And I said, did you read Superman Space Age? He said, what? He did a Superman book? And I said, you haven't announced it. And I hope it gets the momentum to get you a Wonder Woman book, but you don't have to say anything. And so
Yeah,
that
we're
being
pitching one.
good, because we want it, especially the all reds and everything. Again, lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
So, but that'll help you find, your Batman's going to help you find the Superman space age audience. So it's just like, and I think because you're writing substance, and again, huge fan. I'm just going to keep word vomiting my admiration for you the
Well,
whole
thank you. I
time.
appreciate. I will eat your vomit.
Good. I was like, am I going to say word vomit? um, okay. So last question about One Star Squadron. Um, actually, wait, that's a Batman question. Let's talk about Not All Robots, because I read your afterword, which I loved for the story. And again, I made my girlfriend listen to it. The afterwards, I was like, okay, because I thought it was so thorough. How did you talked about this story being inspired by the Me Too movement, and after I read it, a lot of those things clicked. How, I guess, immediately did that inspire you?
Well, I think it's about the toxicity of assuming or like of being defensive in the face of like social problems, or about how we're sort of weaponized against each other, and
Ooh.
you shouldn't allow. And I think part of it is like the division of labor again, which is sort of like, I think, sort of the foundational problem of civilization, that we see each other not as people but as roles. And so, like, well, that's the robot, it makes the money, and then that's the human, I have to support it. And so we see each other as roles rather than as individuals, and that's what makes us easy to manipulate against each other. And I feel like it's the same whether you're trying to divide people by gender, or you're trying to divide them, by economic status or race or whatever. That this is what makes us. This is what turns us into pieces on a chessboard that someone else can play. The fact that we are assigned roles that then put us in opposition to each other, as opposed to allowing us to see and approach each other as unique human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And some of those buzzwords, the idea of weaponizing one another very literally through robots is not lost on
And
me.
it's
And
essentially what the governing, the people who own all the robotics and automated technologies in the future do. It's like, well, the people are our customer base for the robots. We control the robots, and we've convinced the robots that, oh, you're so lucky. The society is for you because you have all the work, all the jobs. And I feel like in a lot of ways, this is what a lot of the people who feel a lot of the sort of disenchanted workforce, or the Rust Belt, or young white males, sort of this alienation they're feeling is not due to the people that they're taking it out against. It's not because of minorities or women. It's because the corporations and the capital class have have reduced them to like this very specific role, and that's what they really resent. But not being able to do anything about the people who are controlling and are probably going to replace them at some point with newer models.
oh,
uh, they lash out at the people around them who are within reach. And this is
yeah,
like the great tragedy of human life, is that we never really focus our anger and resentment at the people who deserve it. We focus it on the people around us.
I think no, you're so right, and that's so tangible, especially with the idea of the robot going to the garage daily, and just they don't even know what they're doing, but they're afraid. Because I think on a surface level, I thought before reading the afterword that it was a story about gun violence, or like the Second Amendment. Oh my gosh, we're afraid of these things in our home. The
Yeah.
resolution to this thing is more guns, which is a narrative we've all seen.
Yeah, and I
But
feel like it's just very much the same thing, where it's like,
yeah,
yeah, you can no longer afford to buy a house. You can no longer afford to retire. You can no longer afford to support a family. But by God, you can afford a $500 gun, and
yeah,
that gives you the sense of being in control of your fate. But eventually, you get painted into a tighter and tighter corner. The only thing you have with which to fight back, or to feel like you are, not that you are not going down without a fight, is that gun. And I feel
yeah.
like this is something that fuels gun violence in America, where so many people are having promise of a normal middle class life pulled away from them, that all they really have to sort of regain their sense of sovereignty is the guns they can't afford.
Yeah. No, you're right. I completely agree. And it's just it's such a gorgeous uh idea, and like especially displayed, and obviously it's Eisner Award winning, am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy needs one. And so I'm so glad you had one.
The good thing
I
about winning one is that it doesn't. You can lose as many as you want after that, and
yeah, exactly. You just have
they
one,
don't
right?
take it away. You don't never write something so bad they take your Eisner back.
And you haven't in either case, but I'm just, that's just the part of me that like once I just want you to have the recognition, in my opinion, you deserve. So that being the case, I'd actually love to hear about your collaboration with Mike Deodato, because again, I thought it was a similarly successful pairing. Did you pitch the book to him? Did he want to hear about it, or was it his? How'd that collaboration?
AWA put us all together. Mike works with AWA a lot, and he's known Axel Alonso since their days at Marvel. So Axel was really the one who said, "Oh, these two should go together," and I think his sort of realistic style worked really well for Not All Robots, especially as a humor title, which it's not really. I didn't really write it. I admit is, it's not just funny, but it is. It got classified as a humor title. But I think, but what really sells it that way is the fact that Mike doesn't try to be funny. It's that he draws everything deadly serious, and so the lines, which are sardonic and ironic, like pop, because he doesn't have characters mugging or doing pratfalls and stuff, against the lines. It feels very much like, to me, like almost like Strange Lovian, and it's largely because of Mike's work, not mine. It's because he puts these very serious, dire visuals in conjunction with lines that are meant to be sort of funny and ironic.
Yes, and I also want to. Lee Luffridge is a buddy of mine, and so I just want to give him. I thought his color palettes were amazing. The
colors are great because they're so muted, but not. They're this great like sort of middle range between being bright and being muted, which is sort of like suggests a dystopia, but also is recognizable as our society.
Yeah, and the panel layouts as well. Was that something that you had like pitched in the script to Mike, or was that all him?
Because that's all Mike.
They were insane.
Yeah, I love it because it suggests this sort of digital, hyper modern, sort of like screens. Like these are like screens or parts of like jumbotrons that are overlapping and stuff. So it really works well with the idea this is like in the near future.
And then the story itself. I'm just so obsessed with with some of the quick-witted lines. One of my favorite ones that kind of knocked me on my ass was when they're talking to the son, and they said, oh, well, if you want to get a job, why don't you go become a coder? And then he says, doesn't it mean society has failed if
that's a strange way of saying your society has failed you.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those moments where it's like, this is the punctuation on the point that I'm making. Like he sort of nails it. And I like to have these moments. So they're little like arias, like you would have in an opera, where it's just like, I bring the point that I've been making for the last 3 or 4 pages home with one line. And I'm glad you recognize that.
That one felt like I had to look in the mirror, because I always thought that was the resolution to the automation of the entire workforce. And so it's like, oh no, there are problems, because, I guess it brings to me, and very literally in this story, the idea of the displacement of people. And that's why I had emailed you. I'm like, I don't know how many questions I have for this, because I'm still chewing on it, Well,
it's like, this is, I think what the modern sort of gig / digital economy has done to us. It's like it's allowed the people who are automating the workforce and are digitizing it and are now like handing it over to artificial intelligence to gradually take. It's like we're playing musical chairs, but the automation has allowed them to quietly take chairs out of the circle. But as long as there's a chair there, they could say, "Well, what's your problem? There's a chair. You just sit in that
Yeah.
chair." And the chair right now happens to be like coding, but so
Yeah.
that's not very many chairs for the 8 billion people on the planet.
Seriously. And it's there's so many things about this I just can't even articulate. And probably if I ever talk to you again, that'll be like I'll have more questions because it'll come to me later, and that one everyone should go read it. The Eisner Award winning Not All Robots. Actually bought this from you. It's signed on my first page, and I'll show everyone. There's your signature. Loved it.
That's the best way to buy it, because that way I get the most money.
And that's exactly how I try to buy too, because that's how you get your money, and also like obviously get signed, and it's the best. If not with you, then at your local comic shop is my take.
Yeah, that's a good second place. But yeah, when possible, I'd say always buy from the creators, because they make much more money off of you buying it from them personally than they do from you buying it at a store, or worse yet, on Amazon or something.
Exactly. And I think I always try and tell people now in my videos, because I'll just do my own YouTube recordings of, hey, here's what I read, here's what I thought, rated out of 10 kind of thing. And oh my gosh, for everyone, Not All Robots, $9.99. That is, I always try and tell people for the trades like that. I just read Public Domain and Beta Ray Bill. The Public Domain was amazing, and I'm like, oh, that's like a $16 book. Everyone should go pick this up. It's affordable enough.
Yeah, I love the fact that when they do these sales, I mean, I do not resent it at all, even if it means like a lower royalty, because whatever you lose on like the profit margin on that sale of the book, you gain from the fact that you got more readers, which in the end is really our goal. Other than making a living, our goal is to get as many people reading this as possible.
Yeah, and like what in my preparation for this, I realized you have been so busy. You've been writing so much, because I thought I've been staying up on all your titles. I haven't been. The one I'm most excited to read is Traveling to Mars. Will you actually, just for all those watching, tell them what it's about? Because I didn't. This book flew so far under my radar, but when I heard you talk to John Suntress about it on Word Balloon, I was like, I need to pick this up right now.
Yeah, the book, and at this point you pretty much can only buy it as a trade, and it comes out in November. But I'm very proud of it. I feel like it might be the best thing I've ever written. And it's about it's about the first manned mission to Mars, and the person they find to send to Mars is a terminally ill man, because they don't have to worry about bringing him back. He's willing to go to Mars, claim the natural gas deposits on Mars on behalf of this company that's sending him, and then just die there. And it's really told in his diary form, like on his way there, about all his regrets and things he wishes he'd done differently on Earth, and all the things that were left undone. And he's also joined on this journey by 2 Mars rovers who have artificial intelligence. They're basically people. They basically have sentient consciences, and they're the ones sort of steering the ship and controlling the mission. But because he's the only human being they've ever met, to them, he's sort of like a god. They think he knows everything. They don't understand that he was just like an assistant manager at a pet store before he, a week before he got on this spaceship. And so, which is probably, I think a theological stand that's probably worth some merit, that maybe God was just somebody who got thrust into that role and wasn't really prepared for what it demanded of him. But it is about regret, and it's about like finding ways to leave the world better than you found it. And that usually entails, leaving something behind for others to build a new life upon your ashes. And I feel like it's probably the best thing I've ever written. And it certainly was like very personal. I draw a lot upon my own sort of thoughts and feelings, my own life in it. And I couldn't, if I could only have people in your listening audience buy one thing, I think that's what I would have them buy.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll have them buy 3 things. So, or 4 things. So there you go. And those are Now Traveling to Mars, because I'm gonna pick it. I'm gonna pick it up when it comes out. I already know. But then Not All Robots. Oh my gosh, One Star Squadron, and Snagglepuss. I think all of them are just amazing. Okay, so lastly, on Not All Robots, because we will talk about Traveling to Mars once I read it, because
That would be the
I'm just
best time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's coming out and it'll be out. So in the afterword, oh sorry, for Not All Robots, is there anything you learned? You have your ideas going into the story. Is there anything as you were writing that like new information? Because I feel like I don't know if you anticipated the fear that the characters have living in the house with this robot as it's coming. Like if you had that fully realized, or is there any ideas that you're like, wow, I never had considered this, but it took me being in this situation writing this to understand it better.
Well, it's kind of about the horrors of this sort of toxic masculinity, this idea that like, well, the men need to be in charge, they need to have all the jobs, and the women and children just need to sort of be at their mercy, financially and otherwise. And to me, it's like that just creates a nightmare world for everyone, men included, because it's like you will, if you control all the money and you are responsible for everything that happens to them, then the 90% of the reaction people are going to have to you are fear and resentment. And is that the way you want to live your life? Is that what you consider power? It's like, okay, you might have all the money, you might have the job, but is it really worth being, sort of feared and resented, and it's sort of like the power that like a serial killer has over the victim. They have, the guy in Silence of the Lambs has over the person in the pit. Does that appeal to you? Probably not, if you think about it. And of course, the people who have to live with the robot live in constant terror of its violence, of its, it lashing out, of the fact that it's, being screwed by its employers, and you're the only people it has there to sort of like take that aggression out on. It's like that. It's a nightmare world, and it's one that some people are actively trying to recreate, and it doesn't do anyone any good, including the people it's designed to benefit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'm excited to step back into that world. I know it's a volume 1, so hopefully we get volume 2 soon. And I I just loved it. And thank you for that. That's I want you to know that as I interview you, I feel so uh I just think you're so smart. And so I'm gonna have to chew on this later. I hope you realize that, because I'm like, oh man, a lot of my answers to your response will just be like, yeah, because
Well, I
I'm
hope
just
you
like,
don't look at them. I hope you don't think about them too closely, because I'm sort of shooting from the hip here. But yeah, but no, what I write about and what I talk about when I come to these podcasts are things I've kind of been feeling for a long time. It's rarely just sort of out of left field. It's
yeah,
usually things that are sort of like obsessing me.
yeah, and I don't know. It's just I think that's the point, right? Of me reading the comics and listening to what you're up to, because I want to know. I love your take. I can tell you that, and that's why you're here. I also want to let you know I didn't on the air. I haven't finished My Bad, and so I think I'm gonna hold off on that for hopefully next time. And especially I'd had Peter Krause on the podcast as well, and he's one of my absolute favorites. So in the future, and obviously if this goes well, but
Yeah,
I'd
he's
love to have
great.
you both on to talk about that, because
Yeah,
I'm
my buddy Bryce, who co-writes it with me, he's around too.
oh great, oh man.
Yeah, no, it's probably the most fun comic I've ever worked on, just because I like all the people I'm collaborating with, and it's also one where it's like I don't have to worry about like messages or, oh, what is it I'm really trying to say here. It's basically just about creating a fun environment which for these characters to sort of fail in.
It is, and like that's what I'm taking from it as I read it. It's just so fun, and I guess I have a couple questions about it too. Was Astro City an influence, and not in a crazy overt way, but just the world building of all the potential heroes? Because that's the vibe I was picking up. Or no?
It's funny because it wasn't actually an influence, when we started, because I hadn't read Astro City, but so many people were saying, "Oh, this reminds me of Astro City. This is like a very Astro City type thing." I went and actually checked out Astro City. I'm a fan of Kurt's,
Of course,
like
you can't
who
read
isn't?
everything.
but you know, when I started reading it, I was like, oh, I see what they're talking about, and this is really great. And you know, so it kind of worked the other way around, where it's like my bad led me to Astro City, rather than vice versa.
Well, that's the best case scenario too, because that's as I get older too, is like, and Astro City is my favorite book to read on an airplane, is just because like, you know, the idea of traveling and then just going into a new world and the world building of it all. And I think like that's what you have here, and I'm so excited to keep going with it. Even just I think it's the second issue, and I'm gonna spoil it, but it's, oh my gosh, who's the antagonist? It's the kid with the crown, Emperor King.
Emperor King, yeah,
Emperor King against the traffic light guy.
yeah, Rush Hour.
Rush Hour, putting him in the container with the circus peanuts, and then accidentally, oh, you're gonna go through the 16 perils, and then accidentally killing him. Was like,
yeah, and that was actually all that. None of that was mine. That was all, you know, Bryce's. Who sorry, my hair's out of whack.
it looks great.
Thanks. But my friend Bryce, who I co-write it with, like he writes all the Emperor King stuff, and that was actually the first thing that started my bad. Was he wrote that story about Rush Hour, you know, getting caught in that trap. Yeah. And he had this character called Acid Chimp. It's like a chimpanzee who throws acid on people. I just thought it was so funny that it's like, wow, we should really just build like, and the idea at the time was like, we'll just build more and more characters like these, and we'll build the world out instead of vertically telling a story, we'll build it out horizontally, where we just gradually introduce more and more of these characters.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I love that. And that's I'm all along for the ride, especially when it sometimes, you know, after reading Not All Robots, after reading One Star Squadron, I'm like, I love to know that you're going into this lane of just fun humor comics. I sure hope it's as much fun to write as it is to read, because I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's so much fun to write, and it's also, you know, kind of I look forward to when we're working on a new issue, because it's like, oh, well, this will be like a it's like this will just be it's like it's not going to break my brain or something writing this. It's just going to be sort of like a fun exercise with friends. And hello to Beyond Comics, who just posted on the screen. Thank you so much. And I would love to actually write more Swamp Thing too. Swamp Thing is absolutely one of my favorite characters in the DC universe or the Marvel universe, because it's like the soul of a poet trapped inside a monster, which is like wonderful.
Good, awesome. He's a buddy. Thanks, Beyond Comics. So glad to have you. But yeah, sorry, I just want to make sure that got addressed. But yes, I'm so glad to know you're having a good time writing My Bad, because also I want to read the next 2 volumes. I know your volume 3 also comes out in November, correct?
Yeah, well, the issues are coming out now, but yeah, the collected edition comes out in November, and as far as we know, this is going to be it. We don't know that we're going to get any more, so it might be good to read these in floppies if you want to see more of them. Absolutely. But yeah, we're really proud of it, and I think it goes. There's just more and more characters. One of the things I'm proud of in volume 3, or I'm looking forward to people reading, is that we introduce this sort of league of regional heroes. So there's the superheroes that are sort of like national, international level, but below that there's like regional heroes. Like there's like Captain Ohio, who's like just a hero in Ohio, or the Lobsterman, who's like a hero from Maine, and these sorts of like just sort of state-based heroes.
The regional.
We're hoping for a shot at the big time.
I love that. Well, awesome. Yeah, I'm still enjoying it as I read it. It's really nice. I'm reading that and Squirrel Girl right now, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. So it's just,
that's good pairing.
Nice. I also think that you and Ryan North, I met him this last year at Comic-Con, and I was like, I just think you're so smart, but also you guys are in such a same lane that I think is so, I just love, because it's just like, you guys write stakes better than anyone else, because even as something like Absolute Power is currently going on, I'm just way more interested in the idea of a hero trying to pay his bills or struggling with a corporation, and I think Squirrel Girl nails that so well. Actually, Okay, so we need to dive into currently what's coming out, which is Batman Dark Age issue 5 came out yesterday. I currently have read it. Um I'd love to just talk about how, number one, how the difference between writing a billionaire like Bruce Wayne, because again, someone like Lex Luthor, for you going into a story like this, what is that? Because you write my favorite Lex Luthor in the Porky Pig story, in just and obviously he's in Superman Space Age. I I love the way you write Lex, but going into something like, you have to write a billionaire that now is obviously a high upstanding upright moral character. How has that been for you? How do you wrap your head around something like that?
Yeah, well, I've never written, I think, from a standpoint that billionaires are, pathological or inherently evil. I think it's more like the money, or the idea that you dump all these resources into one human being and you expect them to have the best interest for everyone at heart. That's sort of warped. That's not a very good bet societally. But it's not that these people are individually just sort of, evil. And so I have no problem writing a good billionaire. I've written,
Yeah.
about Tony Stark before. It's possible for someone to be a good billionaire. It's just you can't trust that they're going to be a good billionaire.
Yeah.
It's sort of like being a Roman emperor. It's like, yeah, you might get Augustus, but you might also get Nero.
Yeah. It's, yeah, no, absolutely. And so I just, and actually that brings me to, I want to ask you probably in between these two stories, but one of my favorite one shots you ever did was the Captain America snapshot issue. Uh, I'll ask you about that later, but I had brushed up on it right before the interview because I was like, was that him? I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, it was, and again, it was like that was sort of a collaboration with Kurt Busiek, because he was the one sort of curating it, and he actually had the idea for the story, which he gave to me, and I wrote it. But yeah, I learned a lot actually writing that, because I had so many little phone calls and chats with Kurt.
Yeah, it's I. Well, we can just talk about it now. We'll talk about Batman Dark Age because that one. So was it? It just makes sense for both of you, especially like how it's very My Bad-esque. It's like Kurt doing Marvels, where it's the pedestrian point of view, um, in this larger world, and that's what I think one of my favorite one shots I ever read because of that issue. Was it your idea to do that perspective, or was it his of let's just do the pedestrian point of view for this Captain America story?
No, I think that was the assignment for snapshots. It's like these are stories about people who are sort of around the heroes, but not the heroes themselves. That these are stories from the street, like people whose lives have been affected by the heroes. And so I wanted to choose this kid who, and the prompt they gave me was like, this happens immediately after Mad Bomb. So what I chose to write about was about how the Mad Bomb sort of destroyed this, or at least caused this madness wave to overtake like a big chunk of New York City. But they immediately came back and they repaired all the damage in like Manhattan and Queens, but they didn't get around to repairing the Bronx. And this is
Yeah.
kind of the venue where this kid lives. He lives in the Bronx, and it's just sort of left in a state of disaster after the Mad Bomb event. And so he takes advantage of one of the few opportunities left to him, which is, joining AIM,
Yeah. And
becoming a villain, basically.
I loved that state because it's also such a real, like, in and I don't need to go down this road, but the Fox News of it all, I think that obviously without the aim and the comic book of it all, but like turning to crime and the idea of poverty being the motivator, just all of that thing I thought was so magnificently well done and such a grounded take. And what this comic book DC Marvel genres are missing right now is just that take, or that reality, just because that's
Right. The reality is that most of us aren't, villains or heroes. We just sort of follow incentives.
Mhm.
And the better the better you craft the societal incentives for people to be productive and loving and, to help each other, the more they're going to do it. I mean, there's a whole discipline devoted to the study of incentives, and we call it economics. So it
Yeah.
shouldn't be a surprise to people when somebody acts upon the incentives that you've laid out to them. And if you only incentivize people, if you the only way people have to like get ahead or to make enough money to support their family is through crime or through shoving other people under the bus, that's what most people are going to do.
Yeah, and I think on top of that too, it's the availability of the opportunity. I think that's the version in your Lex Luthor story to Porky Pig and to oh my gosh, I think that's the Maxwell Lord in One Star Squadron, and it's AIM coming to the protagonist of the Snapshot story. I'm like, they came to them, like as opposed to them having the availability, the opportunity, the privilege to be able to seek out another path, And I thought,
Yeah.
it's very well done.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm like, I feel like I've never heard you talk about that issue, and I keep thinking about that, and it's so silly of me.
In my years,
That's like 5
I've
years
worked
ago.
on like a
Was it?
dozen titles since then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I mean it. You've been so busy, but okay. So going back to Batman Dark Age, I'm so glad we were able to just touch on that because that's an issue I think about a lot, and especially for you saying, "Oh yeah, Kurt Busiek did the whole thing." I'm like, that's why Alex Ross did the covers, and that's why it's like Marvels because I only read a handful of titles from that, and I'm sure I picked up yours because I had your name on it. So just very funny. And that was your first Marvel work, right?
That was my absolutely first Marvel work. Yeah.
That was great story to hang your hat on. Okay, Batman Dark Age. So this is one of the few stories that visits Bruce in his elderly state. You have the Batman Beyond where he can't stop the mission. You have Kingdom Come where his body is broken. This is very much him in a home. Was that something specifically that you wanted to explore?
Yeah, I wanted this to be sort of an old man's imperfect recollections of his life. About how when we look backwards and we tell the story of our lives, it's often tinged with regret and foreknowledge of what's going to go wrong, and also the love you have for the people that you're talking about. So I wanted to be told from that perspective, from somebody in the future who knows how important these people are to him, and how great or how tragic these events are going to turn out, because I think it colors the narration much more, and it makes it much more of a personal sort of, like, it feels like someone's confiding to you when the story is told from the perspective of someone in the future talking about their past than with someone talking in the present about the present, where they don't know what's going to happen any more than you do.
Mm. And I like that too because that's a good window for the audience as well too. I'm like, I know Dick Grayson is important to Bruce Wayne,
Yeah, and I feel like that it was good for that because everyone reading this already knows generally the lore of the Batman. They know who Dick Grayson is. They know who Catwoman is. They know it's Selena Kyle's Catwoman. So, the fact that Bruce also knows, looking back, who these people are, I think makes sense for the audience. You're not
Here's
spoiling anything for them by revealing that Selena Kyle is Catwoman.
yeah, exactly. And um actually I didn't write down any questions about Mike and Laura, but I want to know how is that process? Was that another thing that did DC put you guys together? Did you pitch the book to them? Because that has been I'm so glad to see that collaboration happen.
Well, when Superman Space Age got approved, Brittany Holzer, my editor, and I, like, we discussed artists that we wanted to work on it. She said, well, just make an art, a list, top to bottom, like artists you would think would be good for this. And don't try to like overthink it too much. Don't try to like think of who's available, just ones you actually want. And I'll do the same, and we'll come back and compare. And Mike was the artist on both of our lists.
Oh
So we
wow.
thought, well, let's approach him first. And I thought, well, this will be a courtesy and he will say no, and then we'll move on. But he said yes, which rarely happens, but it's always a good sign when it does, when your first pick says, yes, I'll take this. And I've been very lucky with that. I've been very lucky in getting, like, either in not knowing who was good and having an editor pick someone who was good, or wanting someone specific and being able to get them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, your collaborators, I think, speak for themselves. The work is tremendous. So how much liberty did you give them, because it is, air quotes, an Elseworlds kind of book? The
Mike
costume
has
designs
total
are always
liberty.
changing. Well,
Yeah, Mike has total liberty. He's like the art director. He's like the movie director. I give him a script, of course, with it broken down into like pages and panels, and maybe some like visual references, like this is how I see them dressing. But he has like complete liberty to ignore all of it and create a splash page where he wants a splash page, to move the panels around, to get rid of panels if he wants to, add more, and of course do the costuming and design the characters any way he wants, because he's only it only ever improves on my ideas. I mean, and this is kind of the conversation I've had with him, like, this is just the movie running in my head, which is probably not as good as the movie running in your head
yeah.
as the actual artist.
Yeah.
So this is just to tell you what I'm thinking, but you really need to just sort of like take the ball and run with it.
Yeah. And letting them go and like seeing the costumes that they've done. Like, I'm looking at this Dick Grayson costume and it is just amazing. And even I'll say the all black Batman costume, the later one in this issue, I think is just perfect.
Yeah. Oh, so he has so many great panels. It's hard for me when he sends me like the artwork. It's hard for me not to just instantly put on social media and spoil the issue because it looks so grand.
Okay.
Very gothic.
There's so, and Laura does the coloring, right?
Yeah.
I think she is just, her color
Yeah,
palette.
it's beautiful. It's like when I get them in black and white, they look really good. Like this is like sort of a dark black and white photo of
Yeah.
a world that doesn't exist. But when I get them in color, it's like getting, it's like looking at the stained glass of a cathedral or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I just listened to an interview with James Tynion and he said, and he said, I work on so many books at once because it makes my inbox flood with really great art. And so that's when you're saying that, that's what it makes you think.
Yeah, that's definitely a perk.
Yeah, like, I'm jealous. So what made you want to do this as a period piece, or especially, I want to talk about the war of it all later, but what made you want to do Batman and Superman as period pieces?
Well, originally this was how the Superman was pitched to me, as like being the 2G that would run from the second generation Batman or Superman that would run basically from 1965 to 1985, because it was going to be part of that 5G thing that DC was
Oh,
doing.
okay. Yeah.
But when that got scrapped, they still wanted to do the Superman thing. Well, why don't we just split it into 3 decades? So we got the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then that will allow me to sort of like write about the history, the historical backdrop, because I think one of the things that sort of frustrates me when I go back and read old comics from like Silver Age or whatever, is they don't really talk much about the era in which these comics are being written, because they don't think that it's history. So it's like Watergate could be happening and they don't really talk about it, or it's not really important to the stories of the comic.
Yeah.
Or like Vietnam, it's like how many issues were actually written about Vietnam during the 7 years of the Vietnam War. So I wanted to sort of address that and make this more about like the like history, sort of understanding that it's history. What we know now was important from those decades to our time, actually is important in the comics as well.
And you make it affect, both Pa Kent and was Pa Kent in the Korean War or Vietnam? I might be mixing them up.
I have Pa Kent in World War II in
okay.
mine.
Yeah. So it's, you make sure to put that for Bruce and them. Is it part of those? Is that perspective, you think, like the war times going on, is that really important to you, or just piques your curiosity? What made you want to bring those characters
Well,
to
it's
those?
sort of more. It's not war per se, but it's that every generation sort of like teaches the next. So the experiences that changed or traumatized one generation will show up in how it teaches the next generation. And that was very much like Pa Kent's experience. Like he was traumatized by his experiences in the Second World War, but also learned a lot of valuable lessons. And so he tries to like imbue these into Clark, that the world is full of like madmen who want to take over. And you cannot become one of them because this is what sets the world on fire. And you've got to the most important thing in a battle are the people around you and keeping them alive. And as long as you can do that, you have a chance. These are the lessons he learned from the war, and which he tries to teach Clark. And Clark Kent, to me, really is just sort of a collection of virtues of all the people that he's learned from the people around him. Like he learns compassion from his mother Martha. He learns wisdom from his dad. And I think the most sort of underrated sort of contributor to the pastiche of Clark Kent is Lois Lane, from whom he learns, I think, courage, because she doesn't have any powers. She is perfectly vulnerable, and yet she's always putting herself into incredibly dangerous situations as a journalist.
No, I absolutely, and I think she's finally going to get her due. I loved the two series of the Bendis run, the Lois Lane series and the Jimmy Olsen series for those, and especially that last Jimmy Olsen panel, Steve Lieber crushing, saying, just Jimmy, you're the only one I can goof around with, and I love that that's the perspective they bring, and obviously ending the book with that's what friends are for. I think the Superman family, and like also the Fantastic Four, who you've also written, are just so underrated. Okay, so the last question I have, because I think it wasn't my gut reaction or what I expected in this book. What made you want to tie in the crisis of Infinite Earths of it all? Pariah makes appearances in this book, and there's gorgeous splash pages today about the Justice League being tied up in all of that. What made you want to bring that to the forefront? Was it also the generations, or was it something else?
Yeah, it was sort of the way the 2G Superman was initially pitched to me when I was going to write that, was that this is tying into Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that's why the series was going to end in 1985. So I thought, well, after the 5G thing sort of went away, I thought, well, let's still end it in 1985, but I want it to be, at least in part, about Superman realizing at some point that this is going to happen, that he's on a doomed universe. He's on one of the universes that's not going to make it. And how you continue to be Superman when you know that the one thing you want to do more than anything else, which is to save everybody, you're going to fail at. And I think that's what most of us, the reality most of us live with, is that the people we love, the things we want to do, eventually we're going to fail at. We're going to not be able to be there for them because we're mortal, because we are, vulnerable. And it's the only way to have Superman really sort of understand what it is to be one of us, to understand that his time is also ticking.
Yeah. No, I thought it was so great. And the in the Batman Dark Age, I want to say I love your take on the Joker. I think it's, for a character that's had so many interpretations. I like Mike and Laura's art for him, and just I think it was issue 4, issue 3, where he was doing the stand up. I think it was issue 4, and it was I loved it, and that's how he was getting his notoriety. Love it. I just love your take. Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything in particular to your Joker that you wanted to touch on for his key attributes that you wanted to hit on?
Yeah, well, I think for me, again, it's more about like, this is somebody that, it's not just one bad day. It's like every day is a bad day. It's like this is the path that a lot of us might go down if we had the sort of life that he had, or if we were facing the sorts of, problems that he's facing. So I wanted it to be less about like, oh, this is a criminal mastermind than no, this is a guy who society has failed horribly. And, and he's trying to actually, unlike most of us who lash out at the people around us, he's actually trying to like lash out at the right people. So in a lot of ways, he's not really a villain. He's sort of like an anti-hero.
Yeah, no, it's, and I think that's the best villains, right? Is that, their justifications are apt, and
Yeah, they don't have to be good. They just have. I think you just have to start understand. There's nothing less compelling to me than somebody who's just evil for the sake of being evil. It's like there's got to be something they want, something they're trying to achieve that causes them to cross over the boundaries that most of us think are sacred.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, I love it. Okay, and then now we're almost up out of time, but I do want to touch on X Factor, which is a book that. Okay, I'm a huge Gail Simone guy. And I'm not a huge X-Men guy. I just think that is the most convoluted. It's just terrifying to look at. Gail Simone and you are what brought me to the X-Men. I'd I'd love to talk about X Factor because when I picture what you're up to, I always picture staying in your own lane, working on your own titles. Uh, but now you're part of this big group. How has that transition been for you as you're writing X Factor?
Yeah, it's daunting because it's a very different type of writing, and that I have to factor in what other people are doing and writing, and there's crossovers and events and stuff. It's fun in a way because it's like a camp. It's like going to summer camp or something, and everyone's talking and shining flashlights in each other's eyes after dark and stuff. And but at the same time, it's not like how I'm used to writing. I'm used to writing in solitude and isolation. And so
Yeah.
to actually be like having to talk to people, and it feels like I think, and maybe this is the way everyone feels, but it feels like I'm the only one who doesn't know what they're doing. Like
But I'm
it's like I
probably, yeah.
feel like a 16-year-old pulling onto the freeway for the first time, and everyone's
Yeah.
just seems like they're zooming by at 100 miles an hour. Um, but it's fun, and I'm really enjoying writing it. And Bob Quinn, who I've worked with on a lot of different books, is the artist, and so it's amazing to work with him again. And I'm really happy with how it's turning out.
Oh my gosh. I am too. I just loved your first issue so much. For someone who hasn't read, the only X Factor run I know is really Peter David's. Was that a North Star to you at all, or?
I wouldn't say it's a North Star, but it probably is the one that shares the most DNA with my run. I think
Okay.
tonally, it's probably the one that's like the closest.
Yeah, it's because all I know is that people love his take on Quicksilver in that run, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. Did you get to choose your X-Men? Is my other question.
Sort of. It was a little frustrating because at first they were saying, "Well, who do you want on your team?" And so I would name some people, and they're like,
It's
"Oh,
like
none of those are available. Pick others."
Wolverine, Cyclops. Yeah, you're
Yeah, it's like pick some more. Like, "Oh, none of those are available." It's like going to a Soviet grocery store or something. But
right.
but then I said, "Well, why don't we do it this way? Why don't you, I'll tell you that what I'm looking for, like sorts of attributes, and you tell me who's available." And then it started really clicking. And then also if there was like heroes that or mutants that I wanted to do certain things and there was no one like that available, and I got to create my own, which was really cool. I got to create several of my own mutants, and I think that became the most fun part of the process for me is creating and developing my own mutants.
So, what would your pitch for the book would be your get your foot in the door pitch for the book? We're only one issue in, and that issue is available at your comic shops. I think everyone should read it. You don't need to be reading the other X titles uh to hop on. In my opinion, I'm trying to
Yeah,
sell
yeah,
the.
but I mean you should be reading them because they're good, but you don't
I
need
am
to read them
I'm reading
to stand
several.
X Factor. Yeah, but X Factor, as much as possible, stands alone. It tells its own story. There are, obviously some crossover, details with the other titles. But yeah, don't feel daunted. Don't feel like you can't just jump into X Factor because it's written specifically. You don't even really need to know the history of these characters that are in X
No.
Factor. You can just jump. This is I try to do this every time I write a title for the big two. Is like this is a jumping on point. It's like you don't need to have read 700 issues of X-Men to understand where we are when we start this.
Yeah. And okay, so but for the pitch itself, like so they're a government team, and it's almost I think this is all you the PR take of them being a government team, and even the ad I reposted. They're not hated and feared. They're loved and adored. They're a government covert ops team that is sent in to go do crazy missions, and the government views them as expendable. Is that the take?
Yeah, the idea is basically that they're not just a government sort of assault team, but they're also like social media influencers. Like
Oh, I
they're
love that.
filming all of this for Click Clock, which is sort of the Marvel Universe's version of TikTok,
Yep.
which immediately sort of places them at cross purposes with their own survival because there's obviously a viewership incentive for them to die or to do self-destructive things, which is sort of my take on social media in general, is that this destroys people because all of the incentives are stacked against you doing something that's not your best interest. This is why the algorithm rewards like right-wing extremists or people
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
like Mr. Beast or people who are like you know putting people in harm's way, because this is what people want to see. This is like edgy. This is like different.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to watch you pet a kitten on on TikTok. So the algorithm drives them to increasingly more dangerous like things.
Yeah.
It's about the
Yeah. And
self-destructive nature of
it's it's so good. I think that twist on it was exactly what I wanted. And also I want you to know that you're using one of my favorite X people, Havoc.
who's that?
I'm very
Oh yeah.
Havoc.
Now Howard's sort of the main character. Like he sort
Oh,
of like
really?
takes over the story in a little ways. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't know that yet because you've only read
Yeah.
issue 1, but
Yeah.
he becomes a major character.
The gentle push, and I was reading the solicitations, and that's what it was really pushing for Havoc to be the guy. I love the gentle push and the nudge that you guys you gave him in the story. You know what I mean? Like, we are really joining the team with him. He doesn't know what he's walking into, and what we thought it was going to be at the ending. I was like, oh, this is totally different. So
Yeah, all of his idealism or what he thinks he's going to accomplish on the team, it's like radically changes the moment he's on the team. He realizes he was kind of like sold a bill of goods by the recruiting office.
yeah, and I also wait. Now I have to ask the question. You talking about what X-Men you wanted and maybe what they needed to be used for. Is that how did that help how you wrote the Angel scene of getting the team together?
Yeah, I think that this is what, is like sort of driving it, is that these people are, they might come and go because one, it's a very dangerous job, and two, their skill sets might not be needed on every mission. So it allows us to have sort of an expanded X factor with people sort of filling in roles and coming or getting hurt and then leaving for a little while and coming back. So it allows us to have like an ensemble cast story with a lot of people, but it doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like that when you're actually reading an issue, because the issue will focus on like 4 or 5 people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible, and I want everyone who is listening right now to go subscribe it, go to your local comic shop, or go run. Mark, are you going to a convention anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm going to a couple. I'm doing Rose City Comic Con here in Portland, where I live. And then in October, I'm doing the San Diego Comic Fest,
Oh,
the
okay.
smaller, more selective one in October. So yeah, hit me up either of those places, and those, I think those are the only 2 I'm doing remaining in 2024.
Yeah, and so okay, so we have those. You guys know where to go pick those up. Go buy those issues from him. Go buy those back issues. I think this is a good place to end it. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. All this gratitude. Where can they find you on social media?
I am active on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram, and my handle for all of those is at Manruss, Manruss. So catch me outside.
Yeah, go catch him over there. Go pick up so many volumes of work that he's done. Make sure to go buy the new Traveling to Mars trade, as well as adding My Bad and Batman Dark Age X Factor to your pull list. Is that everything you're working on currently?
Yeah, I think you covered it. I think that's it. There's some things that haven't been announced yet, but can't
Well,
order those.
we can't worry about those yet. Thank you so much, Mark. We will see you guys next time, or see you next time.
Bye, everyone.